But there's a history before that as well. In 1940, in the Muslim League, one of the meetings there, they actually laid claim this whole place and said that this is going to be part of Pakistan, right? I mean, of course, the entire ramification of that, I don't even think Pandit Nehru or Mahatma Gandhi understood it at that point of time. And this is where the entire two-nation theory kind of started, coming into play. How do we as Indians see that?
We should go back to the phenomenon of Jinnah, how Jinnah rose. Now, Jinnah had a very checkered career till the time the Second World War started. So much so that people in the Muslim League would also not take him seriously. They would actually, the regional rulers, say for example in Punjab or in Balochistan or Kalat or Bengal, they would not take him, they would not take him really seriously. But then the arrogant person that Jinnah was, he said that I created Pakistan only with the help of my stenographer and my typewriter. A lot of people who were prominent leaders within the Congress and outside it were not really aware because the Britishers were playing both the communities as they have been doing subsequently. I mean, the Western Plough Bloc, they would play these two communities for their own advantages. Right. And over a period of time, the British actually kept very, they had a hawk's eye on Jammu and Kashmir because being a world power, they were very mindful about the strategic aspects of this swathe of territory, which actually bordered China, Russia, and Afghanistan.
No, that may be the case, but at the same time, the Prime Minister, in this case again, Jawaharlal Nehru, he has to share that blame of not taking the right decisions.
Nehru was completely rabidly anti him. He would call him names that he's a foolish man, he's an idiot, he's this.
Jawaharlal Nehru would abuse Hari Singh.
So he wrote to Patel and he said, look, if this is what the situation is right now, and since the accession was provisional, I'm actually going to withdraw it.
Right.
What is going to happen? As it is, I'm made irrelevant. And if you are agreeing in the United Nations to a situation where things may transpire that this whole state will go to Pakistan, then I might as well withdraw the accession from you all.
So my question to you is that when Nehru agreed on a UN, ceasefire in 1949, by that time, the Indian military was actually at an advantageous position in a number of areas as far as Kashmir was concerned. And then we suddenly say, okay, now, this is the line of control. Everything will be hunky-dory in that sense. And, United Nations can decide what it is. I mean, there's series and number of blunders that our top leadership, and again, I'm going to say Jawaharlal Nehru, I mean, maybe you won't like that, but he seems to be on this role of making blunder after blunder after blunder. I mean, of course, I understand a lot of good decisions were taken in the 1950s, but these are consequences, whether it is POK, whether it is, the relationship with China, how we lost the 1962 war, how our military was pretty much starved of funds. I mean, I'm alluding to what is a very pacifist kind of an attitude. Of course, we can't go back in time right now, but it is important to realize that these were the mistakes made by Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru. I mean, would you agree to that? As you said, nothing is black and white, but at the same time, these are blunders that come to the fore.
No. You see, if you are the head of the administration of any country, if things go wrong and you are actually spearheading the strategy on whatever has gone wrong, you will have to take the blame. I mean, there is no two ways to it. So to that extent, going to the United Nations and thereby what happened before that, allowing that time where Kabilis got in to Kashmir Valley and the Punchis, etc., that thing is totally on the doors of the then Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru. Also the fact that if this thing is taking place, then he has to see whether our own people are actually in charge of the army operations. At that time, the British were in charge of the operations. Unfortunately for us, they were acting against our interest. Fortunately for Pakistan, they were acting in their interest because it was in the interest of the British. So this is one. So for a moment, please don't misunderstand me. Wherever he's made a mistake, internationalizing the whole problem by going to the United Nations, then what transpires in the United Nations, then he having to send Gopalaswamy Iyengar, then at that particular crucial moment of end November, December 1947 and the beginning of 1948, when all this is at its peak, then can you imagine the kind of interpersonal problems, relationship problems which is taking place between Patel and Nehru? So top people of Indian leadership, they are not seeing eye to eye.
But you talked about Patel. We talked about it a little earlier also. Sardar Patel is, of course, a major force in the cabinet at that point of time. He's home minister. But there was always a pushback against him. Would you say that that is correct?
Oh, yes, there was a pushback against him.
By Nehru?
Yes.
Particular?
You see, Nehru, if you see, whether it was Mr. B.M. Kaul, who became very crucial to the situation when the whole thing deteriorated in 1962 with China. So he had some hand-picked people which he would like to put at different places. He had very strong likes and dislikes. So the more Gopalaswamy Iyengar disliked Hari Singh, the more prominent he became.
Right.
So he became the blue-eyed boy for Nehru in Kashmir because Gopalaswamy Iyengar, mind you, for 4-5 years had been the Prime Minister of Jammu and Kashmir. So he was appointed by Hari Singh.
Right.
And look at this guy who's completely anti him. So all these things, interpersonal relationship, jealousies, insecurity, is all there for us to see in personalities like Nehru. I'm not denying that for a moment. When I said, everything is not in terms of black and white, because the British were too complicated. They would say one thing and do exactly the opposite. So when India went to the United Nations at the end of 1947, it was facing a lot of heat militarily. They were facing reverses. And it was becoming apparent that no one is coming to the rescue. I mean, Indian army was bogged down. We were running into winters. Our airstrips were non-functional, etc., etc. Exactly 1 year later, when we agreed to a ceasefire, the same thing was repeating itself. We were again in massive heat militarily. So what the British and the Americans would do is to pressurize us militarily, right, and diplomatically in 47 end and in 48 end, and make us agree to something. You can turn around and say that, look, we should have had that kind of bile, जिसको कहते हैं जिगरा होना चाहिए था, to have stood up.
नहीं, जिगरा तो बिल्कुल नहीं था.
तो जिगरा नहीं था.
हाँ.
अब नहीं था तो नहीं था.
अब क्या कर सकते हैं?
We were not there, So, I mean, these are milestones which give themselves to a lot of criticism, and partially those criticisms are correct.
We are paying the price in blood for the decisions that were taken in 1947, 48, and it's a very, very heavy price.
Yes.
So Sardar Patel actually was trying to convince Jawaharlal Nehru to take a stronger stand against a lot of the princely states. Would that assumption be correct?
I get an impression, he was inadvertently, he was being placed into a situation where he was having to speak on behalf of the Hindu interests.
Yeah, Hindu and Sikhs as well.
And Sikhs as well. I mean, Hindus and Sikhs.
Yeah.
Right. But the same, it's only later that we've subsequently created a fault line or something like that binary. So that was what was happening. So he basically wanted, but he was against India going to the United Nations. He was against, in fact, he says that all the important decisions and speeches of Nehru also used to come to him, which he used to actually see as information and broadcasting minister. So around the time when we were about to sort of tell that we were going to, internationalize the whole thing. So Nehru was going to give a speech around 28th of October, 1947. And when he saw that speech, by which time he made his private secretary, Mr. V. Shankar, actually run to Akashvani Bhavan in Delhi to try and stop him from saying those lines. But by which time Nehru had gone in and the broadcast had started. So obviously he didn't want that India should internationalize the problem. The fact is, you were part of the cabinet.
Right.
Right? So if you take a decision you are not a party to, and you are subsequently saying that you were against it, these two things are slightly contrarian.
But at the end of the day, he was the Home Minister, Sardar Patel, and Jawaharlal Nehru was the Prime Minister.
Yes.
So naturally, the Prime Minister's word is definitely more stronger than the Home Minister's, no matter under any circumstance. Right? He's the head of the cabinet.
And he would remind him ever so often.
Right, of course.
Nehru would remind him ever so often because both of them had been colleagues, no?
Right.
So once or twice, Patel was on the verge of resigning in December itself, December 47, when Nehru had written to him that, look, I'm the Prime Minister, so you bloody well do what I want you to do.
Right. Right. That was in the context of giving Pakistan.
Again, it had something to... No, that was in the context of Kashmir. Where, a lot of infrastructure needed to be supplied. And it was being done through Gopalaswamy Iyengar.
Right.
To which Patel had said that this is part of Ministry of States and the Home Ministry's mandate, and let me do it. To which Iyengar had complained, and Nehru said that, look, you don't meddle into these affairs.
Enlighten us a little bit about the part of POK, which was then handed over to the Chinese. What were the circumstances for that? And why would Pakistan so early on actually go ahead and do this? This, I believe, is in the early 60s, is when they handed over the Gilgit area to China.
So this is I think if my memory serves right, this is called the Saksham Valley.
Right, Saksham Valley.
Right. So that area was given to the Chinese. This was post 1962.
Right.
If I'm not
64, I think.
Post 1962. So around 63 or something. Now at that time, if you remember,
but the Chinese lay claim to that area.
You see, that was an area where Hunza and Naggar,
right,
which was part of the larger Gilgit agency, right? Those guys would threaten, that they would either align themselves with the Amban of China, who was based there in the vicinity, or they would threaten to align with Russia, because that was that area where the three empires met: the British, the Chinese, and the Russian. So obviously it was very strategic. So at that time, after 1962, Nehru had started a series of negotiations where from our side, Sardar Swaran Singh was leading the negotiations, and from the Pakistan side, it was the ever flamboyant Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, who was perhaps the industry minister around that time. So what was happening was that we had lost this war, and I presume around that time
to the China.
That we were mentally obviously very down. Psychologically, everyone was down. I mean, Nehru was down, and on top of that, we had created this song which actually till yet haunts us. Lata Mangeshkar song, "Ae mere watan ke logon zara aankh mein bhar lo pani." एक एक ने 10 को मारा और फिर सो गए जान गंवा के. I mean, you see, it sort of is a kind of a song which really brings you down.
Absolutely.
And Nehru supposed to have cried, etc., etc. So all that. So in that negotiation, I have read in one of the then Foreign Secretary's book, Mr. Gundevia's book, about these negotiations, and we had almost agreed to give 7/8 of the valley away to Pakistan. That's what is said in that book. And so driven completely to the walls, we had then said no. and that negotiations had broken down, and then of course Nehru died and etc. And then Sheikh Abdullah had also gone to Pakistan. So all that was transpiring. So taking advantage of India's weakness and morale, low morale, etc., Pakistan had wanted to gain some brownies with the Chinese.
Right.
Basically, with the idea of negotiating or driving a hard bargain with India.
Right.
And I think it was from that point of view that that huge swathe of territory, which is so strategic and which we lay claim to, was given away by someone else to someone else.
Right. I mean, it's one of the most complex scenarios and realities that any country can confront as far as POK is concerned. Of course, we've talked about some of the historical the progression as far as the POK is concerned, the actual line of control is concerned. I mean, we can talk about so many things. We've had so many wars, so many different, conflicts have happened. So many lives have been lost over the years. How do you see the latest situation unfolding after the, Pahalgam massacre, where so many innocents were shot dead? There is a lot of, how would you say it? People are demanding blood. There is a sense that India needs to do something about it. How do you see that?
You see, there actually, I want to bring in this whole concept of the two-nation theory,
right,
and then relate it to that particular geopolitical region. To start with, the fact that India and Pakistan got created meant that the two-nation theory had triumphed. Now, once the two-nation theory has triumphed, then what is the whole logic of you trying to, or rather India trying to, again maintain the same stance which had led to start with a ignominious retreat in terms of what is going to come to haunt us for the rest of our lives?
Yeah.
You see, it's very easy to say that it was a big headache and we got rid of the head. Therefore, there'll be no headache, right?
Yeah.
I don't understand that logic. Now, I relate this to areas contiguous to Jammu and Kashmir. Areas contiguous to Jammu and Kashmir are what? Xinjiang, Tibet. Now, these are huge areas.
Right.
In comparison to the area which...
princely state of J&K was the largest princely state in terms of area as far as India was concerned.
Perhaps Hyderabad was more.
No. I'm pretty sure about my stats.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, I wouldn't dispute that. But why I refer to Xinjiang and Tibet is that the way Chinese tackled it, they were equally strategic areas. They were actually not Chinese. They were not Han Chinese. And Xinjiang and Tibet also had the history of remaining independent.
Right.
And they as a group were a completely distinct group. You had the Uyghurs and you had the Tibetans. But what did the Chinese do? The Chinese didn't follow a two-nation theory.
Right.
They said strategically, it is imperative that China should have control over these two places, and took control. Whatever would happen would happen.
They also did it very quickly. I mean, in 1949, the Chinese state was, as we know it now, was formed. And, by 1962, they had annexed large parts.
And what did we do?
Yeah, we didn't do anything. We just again, I'm going to blame Jawaharlal Nehru for
so that's
it, right?
what I'm saying. The whole thing.
The Hindu, what was it? The Hindi Chini. Bye.
Huh. Yeah, exactly. So this same thing, once you've lost out on the two-nation theory, why are you unnecessarily going to adopt the same approach which had made you lose
Right.
the unity of the Indian nation? And if you apply the same strategy, you will actually not be able to unite this. So earlier what should have happened was, now we are not going to talk about Hindu or Muslim or overwhelming majority or blah blah. No, this is strategically important for us. So our armies will go into Gilgit. Our armies will go into Skardu in Baltistan. Our armies will also be going into and retaking Mirpur and Kotli and Bagh and all the areas of Punch Jagir other than Punch town, and we'll take it. If we have to lose in terms of our men, we will lose it, but we will take it. And which was the enemy? The enemy was Pakistan. I mean, over a period of time, we were bound to prevail. Why didn't we take that? I mean, in any case, in United Nations, you see, no one was supporting you. So, let no one support.
So, well, that's the current reality as far as POK is concerned. But before, I wind down and we come to a conclusion, I do want to talk a little bit about Jawaharlal Nehru again. But in context, now I want to talk about his decisions as far as China was concerned. So, we have Pakistan, two new countries, nations, the relations are at rock bottom. It's not even been 5-6 years since partition. So I'm talking about 1955, 54. And then you have China. And then China pretty much walks into Tibet, right? The Dalai Lama flees to India. What was going on in Pandit Nehru's mind at that time, and also the decisions that he was making? It seems history repeating itself, where we had disaster after 1947, POK, so many other problems we had. And then we're making the same mistakes with China. We're not able to counter them. We don't have a proper narrative. Tibet, where we had a DC there. I think we had a gentleman by the name of Jory, Mr. Jory. He was the last DC of Lhasa. And he comes back with the Dalai Lama, but we kind of accept it. The Indian cabinet accepts that, okay, now they've taken over. And we're not still prepared for what happens in 1962, which is the war with China at that point of time.
Just give me 2 minutes, Arjun, to put the whole thing into perspective, and that is what will bring Nehru's role. It'll give clarity to Nehru's role, so to speak. So I go back in history 10, 12 years earlier, and we start with when the process of partition was gaining in strength, right? Now what happens in 1946? 1946 in September, Nehru is the external affairs member of the Viceroy's Council. Much against Wavell's advice, who was the Viceroy, at that particular point of time, right, elections had already been held in 1946, February, and there was a very strong Congress ministry,
right,
headed by the Frontier Gandhi, Bacha Khan's brother, Dr. Khan Sahab. He was there as chief minister. He, against all advice, goes there, and within 1 week of his tour there, he creates a situation where this whole place, Northwest Frontier Province, becomes anti-Congress, right? He does that. He has that penchant and he has the propensity to do that. I'm not getting into his intentions. His intentions may have been very good, but the fact of the matter is the impact of his visit was a rank negative. जिसको कहते हैं ना, आप बैल मुझे मार, या कुल्हाड़ी को लेके अपने ही पैरों पे मारना, is what I see again and again happening with Nehru. Yeah. This is what he does with Balochistan. Now, Balochistan on 15th of August, 43% of our current, territory, which lies in Pakistan, was an independent country. You see, the Nawab of the Khan of Kalat.
That's the largest. Balochistan is the largest province of Pakistan now.
Yeah. So, Kalat, the Khan of Kalat, because Kalat was almost 80%, and otherwise before the Treaty of 1876, right, it was almost 100%.
Right.
So, So Kalat says that, look, I am not part of those 560 odd princes.
Right.
I have a separate treaty, like the way Afghanistan has,
Right.
or like the way Persia has. So I'm completely independent. The British agree to it.
Right.
Jinnah agrees to it.
Right. Right.
Right?
Yeah, and he gave assurance to
Yeah.
Khan of Kalat.
Yeah.
He does.
And then you find Nehru's completely backtracked.
Right.
And the Khan of Kalat, then in a huff, actually, subsequently, in April, makes a radio announcement and aligns himself, seeing no other alternative, with Pakistan, because the Pakistan army is going to move in.
Yeah.
Now, you see, these are things which should have actually not been swept under the carpet.
Absolutely. I mean, these were big signs that, this might happen to POK.
Then in 1950, what do? We do nothing when China walks into Tibet. And before that, as you rightly said, when Dalai Lama comes into India, he has to leave Lhasa to come to India. The kind of cold reception he gets
Right.
by Nehru. I've read the oral history, which was actually recorded, about what Dalai Lama has to say about his meetings with Nehru. And India then refuses to raise this question in the United Nations on behalf of Tibet. The Tibet delegation, before going to the United Nations, comes to meet Nehru and says, no, you don't need to go to UN.
Right.
And who raises the question?
And this, after Nehru has already been to the UN for.
Yeah, and who raises the question of Tibet in UN? Not India. Some, country, I think in Central America,
Right.
which raises this issue of Tibet. So this kind of a policy where, you are already defensive. We lost NWFP, we lost Baluchistan, we lost Azad Kashmir, we lost Gilgit. Nehru was a prodigious writer.
Right.
On any damn thing he would write. Long, long letters. I mean, his collected works, if you see, are full of...
You studied them.
Yeah, I
That's,
studied them.
the DG
And
as well.
yeah, and he wrote on any damn thing. But on Gilgit, there's not a single mention.
Right.
1/3 of Jammu and Kashmir goes, and there's not a single mention. I have a feeling between Mountbatten, him and Attlee, they decided one evening while they were meeting, okay, we'll give it to you and we'll not make any hullabaloo about it. Now, this is not the way to do it. You're actually, these gifts which you are parting with are what are going to actually come back to haunt you. So I personally believe that this festering wound of Jammu and Kashmir has been allowed to fester on account of acts of omission and commission by our Prime Minister for 17 years, and thereafter, and he also looked after the external affairs.
Of course. Yeah.
Last thing, Arjun,
Batai.
and that is that this narrative of ours with regard to Jammu and Kashmir since its inception in 1947 has undergone a sea change,
Right.
because of a lot of documentary evidences which have been brought to light. The idea is to study them.
And you have actually been doing a lot of work in that. And I believe you'll be coming up with a book about a lot of documentation.
So when I saw it, I said that, look, I need to, change the whole narrative and substantiate it, completely authenticate it with the documents. And so I started, and I thought I'll finish it in one volume. But now the whole thing is running into 3. So
No, that's fine. But I guess the moot point in that is, and the main takeaway from the research that you're doing is that Pakistan has really no locus stand as far as
absolutely
the
no.
entire POK
No locus
is
stand.
concerned.
And
It's
it need not.
Indian territory, and that's where the buck stops.
Before I end, I must say, and we need not follow the same policy which we followed earlier in face of the two-nation theory weapon which Jinnah had adopted. We need to change our weapons too.
One final comment. I mean, we both can go on for a long time, but Asif Munir in bringing up the two-nation theory again, the army chief of Pakistan, I think it also points towards the existential crisis as far as Pakistan is concerned, because they are going through a lot of turmoil right now, whether it's economic. They barely have $8 or $9 billion in reserves. There is strife in Baluchistan. You talked about it extensively. I mean, the history of it. They seem to be in a very, very tight spot. And I think in some ways, this entire Pahalgam massacre is actually helping them, raise their voice and come back to the international forum, because otherwise it's become a non-entity.
You see, since 1947, there has been an existential problem for Pakistan. They have been in that situation since then.
Right.
And any time and every time we talk about Pakistan as a failed state,
Right.
you see, the Western Bloc and now the Chinese will bail them out.
Right.
Right? So, this situation is sui generis. It will continue. In fact, in 1946,
IMF has been giving them funds and, making them keep afloat, like for now, the last 3 years,
this
2
is
years.
a very interesting observation. You see, the Belgian president of the Security Council was the person in charge who created the problem in the United Nations at the behest of the British and the Americans for us. The problem got created by the Belgian president.
Talking about
1948. 47, 48. There was this gentleman called Van Langenhove who was there representing the Belgians. So he was propped up by the Americans and the British. Their representative in India, you know what he said then? He was obviously at variance with whatever his representative was saying there. He said that the Pakistanis, this is happening because the Pakistanis, this is his exact words, are ready to prostitute themselves.
Right.
So if they prostituted themselves in 1948, 47,
And they continue.
then they continue to prostitute even now.
they
So
are-
that's what it is.
Franchisee of brothel by now.
Yeah.
So on that very sobering thought, thank you so much.
So sorry that the thoughts are...
Raghavendra Singh ji, thank you so much. We had a great conversation. And of course, as we have discussed, these conversations can go on and on. But I think it gives a good perspective of where we stand and the complexities that modern day, whether it is our politicians, whether it is our military planners, face when it comes to the situation with Pakistan. They've already threatened nukes as far as towards India are concerned. One of the ambassadors yesterday said something about that. We don't worry about numerical strengths because we have the nuclear option, and they seem to be putting a lot of pressure on India about this. But on that note, we'll bring our discussion to an end. Thank you so much for watching AB Decodes or Arjun Bhagat Decodes. Do subscribe. And, we are going to continue some very interesting discussions in the future as well. This was, of course, about the latest situation in the context of the latest situation. So I'll see you next time. Goodbye.